We're gonna, even though we're moving ahead at breakneck speed here because we have a full listing of people who have signed up to speak, we're gonna move ahead instead of waiting until 7 o'clock. I'm assuming the Thad is ready to go, and so we'll call on Thad Riley.
Thank you for having me here this evening. So I have a great website, and you can read all about folks nowadays. So when they go out and give a speech and they talk about what issues they're all about and what they believe in, between the media and between the websites and the tech that we use, right? People kind of get the message. So folks would say, oh, that he's a constitutional conservative. But what I'd like to do is share a few stories with you tonight that'll give you a little insight into me, my beliefs on what I think about our Constitution, and what I think about the moment in history that we're all standing in right now. Because I'm with you tonight in a very, very serious moment. For me, a lot of that moment started in July of 2020. I was on a Zoom. I'm so glad I'm done with most of the Zooms. Are you all glad you're done with most of the Zooms?
Amen.
Give me a break. All right. But I was on a Zoom for school board, and I was a joint school board member and Brentwood school board member out of Brentwood. And we're on the Zoom, and we're making some final decisions about the school year and what the fall is going to look like. And I'm listening to this idea of the recommendation of only remote school for our children. And I'm listening to all the excuses and all the points that they're making. And I'm sitting there going, this doesn't make any sense. Now, I have 4 kids in public schools, 3 at Exeter High School. We're the high school that gets sued all the time. We're sued every week. Horrible. 1 at Cooperative Middle School, and my oldest 2 kids are graduates of Liberty University. So I don't have to pay for anything for those 2 rascals. And they moved out and did their own thing. So they're out living in the
Off the payroll.
stuff. They're off the payroll. They do owe me a phone payment and insurance payment in a couple days. So we'll get that. And I'm listening to this whole thing. And there's 1,500 people, and the list is growing. I'm watching this Zoom. And I got to tell you, on the school board, I was always known as the guy who would be outspoken, but I was the uniter. And everybody is sitting there, they're nodding their head about our kids being put on remote. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, and then my phone is just vibrating like crazy. So I took it, I put it on silent, I put it on the other end of the desk. And I clicked my hand up on the Zoom. And for the next 15 minutes, I took them to task on every single thing they were talking about with remote school. They had not gotten state funding for masking, and back then that was the only way to get children into the schools per the governor. They had not done the research, they had not done the work, and all these kids were going to get a less experience than they've ever gotten in school before. And listen, I'm a little bit of a numbers guy, but I'm more of a people guy. And I'm watching this story unfold, and I'm watching every other school board member furious at me. And they're fighting, and 30 of them, and they're doing this whole big, not 30, I had 3 other members join with me, but they were fairly silent. And I thought to myself in this moment, the same thing that many of you are thinking right now about what is going on in our world. When you wrote that bill, you're on the right side of history. And you will be remembered for generations to come over the decisions that you are willing to make today. Those decisions don't matter for me. I'm 50. They matter for my kids. They matter for my grandkids. And they matter for the future. This matters now more than it's ever mattered. Now, I'm as pro-life as they come. I can't tell you why Democrats are like supporting my campaign. But these moms are giving us money and encouraging me on this path. Because it's all about children and their education in so many ways. I believe there has never been a more important election in my children's history, in New Hampshire's history, than this election right now. And it's the perfect moment for an outsider to step in. Somebody who's raised a family, built a business, had a great marriage. My wife's fantastic. She doesn't come because she's a distraction. People always like to talk to her. She's too nice. But She really is. Some of y'all met her. She's a very nice person. This is that moment, just like it was for Virginia. Remember what happened down there last year with Glenn Youngkin? And people say, Dad, listen, a conservative like you, somebody who's pro-life as strong as you are, who's spent most of his time serving in the church. Till about a decade ago, things started to transform around him. Somebody like you could never win in a purple state like New Hampshire. What happened in Virginia? That state's blue. They voted by Biden for over 10 percentage points, and Glenn Youngkin swept through there pretty easily at the end. And he beat a former governor, former chair of the DNC. Don't think for a second that Goliath cannot fall in this election. I haven't believed it for a second. I refuse to believe it right now, because this is a fight that is good. This is a fight that is worthy. I called my mom. Some of you heard this story recently. I shared it in a couple places. I called my mom a couple weeks ago, and I said it was the day that Roe versus Wade was overturned. And I said, did you ever imagine it would happen? She's 85 years old. She's as ornery as the day is long. She led a pro-life ministry in Dayton, Ohio. Jericho Project in the 80s. And she said, yep. I'm like, are you kidding me? She's like, no, I always believed it would happen in my lifetime. She never gave up hope that we could do something amazing. Something would happen in the most unlikely way to change history. Because of this, hundreds of thousands of babies are going to be born this year. Can we clap for that?
Yeah.
The power of this moment is not lost. But I'll bet you anything you were like me 2 years ago and you thought Roe versus Wade would just continue. I'll be honest. You're better than me. But I've learned something from it. I really have. I've learned what fights are worthy and what fights are not worthy and not worth my time. That fight that day, I got outvoted 25-4 on that school board. I think somebody had 2 votes. I think it was 26-4. We got crushed. We kept fighting. But guess what happened? We went back a couple of days later and we met in Brentwood. We sent the Brentwood kids back to school. They heard the arguments. Brentwood was the only school in our SAU to go back and put their kids back in school. And the same people that were sending me hate letters and one even death threat, you know what they chose after all their anger about us sending kids back to school? They sent their kids back to school. Because they love their kids too. Because they're on the right side of history. There's no games in this election. There's no playing around. This matters more than it has ever mattered, because we have an opportunity. The other party, the Democratic Party, they don't even know what they stand for. You have a doctor named Tom Sherman that would still have kids in masks in schools, even though they don't work. My wife works in a retirement community. She had a mask off 6 months before my children did in public schools. Make it make sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it's wrong to do, and it's wrong for today, and it's wrong for our next generation. But this is our moment. This is our hopeful moment. And you can see the tide is changing. And people are waking up. And they're showing up at meetings, and they're getting empowered, and they're finding their inner strength, because it is so much about the good that we can do today. I had no idea I'd be doing something like this. 2 or 3 years ago, when I started fighting against critical race theory in the schools and sexual identity conversations, and I was on the front lines of that, I had no idea that that was God's plan in that moment, to prepare me, to have me study on and on about the 5 tenets of critical race theory, how it is almost cultish in its existence, how it isn't a class, but it is an ideology that permeates our schools. It is being taught in New Hampshire public schools. And if you think it's not, I can tell you story after story after story of true stories of children that are being affected because of the whiteness of their skin, as their parents have told me on the back deck. These are real stories, and they're happening today. So what do? Well, we take action. Paul Terry did, and a lot of you did, by getting behind the Parents' Rights Bill. That's round 1. Sometimes you got to go to round 6 to win. The abolitionists did back in the 1860s, right? Mm-hmm. They fought the good fight. The fight is worthy. And it's so much more about that. It's about returning powers away from leaders who continue to pursue power and pursue making decisions on a whim. As you all know, I don't need to tell anybody here, we have this thing called a New Hampshire Constitution. It empowers the legislators to create bills that are passed by laws, right? The governor signs and vetoes. These mandate things, they're for the birds. I had lunch with this guy. I gotta tell you, he drove me crazy the whole lunch. He was just rattling off facts to me. I'm just like, I can't even eat right now. You're talking too fast. But one of the things he said to me in this conversation, he's a very abrasive guy. But you know what he told me? He said, when you're governor, are you going to do a bunch of mandates? I said, man, I've always built things on trust. I've always counted on the people around me to do such a better job, and I found by empowering them and strengthening them and standing behind them, we'll be so much better off than it being about one person. It's never about the one person. It's about the 1.4. He told me this one piece that was so important. He said, if you go out and you start making some unilateral decisions, I got nothing. I got no way to call you. I got no way to talk to you. I got no way to communicate with you because you're a governor. And that's not your job. But my state rep, I'll call my state rep. I'll call my state rep. I'll call my state senator. I will have conversations on the front lines, and that's the way I want it to be. Mm-hmm. I really like the guy. I won't go to lunch with him anymore. It was an hour and a half, and I was so worn out. But he did buy, so I might go if he does that. I get hungry sometimes, y'all. It's true. But I took that and I said, whoa, that's a real story. That's meaningful. So I can tell you, and I hate it when folks just sit there and get pledges and promises and all this stuff. Although I did hold up that sign in I think it was 2020, and it says promises made, promises kept. Did anybody have that sign?
Yeah.
I held that up in Manchester at the rally. That was a lot of fun. These aren't things, and I talk about the campaign and story sometimes so you understand who I am and what I'm all about. And I think we can do some really, really powerful and amazing things right now. And I think it is going to be a red tsunami. I coined that, by the way, one time. That's the word. And I think if we do the work, we support our candidates, and we work hard, and we have some faith in what is going on. We remember what happened with the Supreme Court. We can do good. I will tell you this. I used to weigh 400 pounds, 389. I like to be accurate. I was 37 years old. I went to the doctor. He said I'd live till I was age 50. I looked it up online. I'm like, oh, he's right. And I had like a bunch of health problems at the time. I was a pretty sick guy. I'd just been diagnosed with diabetes. I had sleep apnea that was so bad. I had one of those CPAP machines, the whole thing going on. And I was a morbidly obese young man. And I looked at my daughter. She was 4 years old at the time. Now she's a 17-year-old high school girl. She's good most of the time, and then sometimes we have our moments. So, I have 6 kids, you can handle it, right? And I remember looking at her, and I thought to myself, she ain't going to have me around. I'm not going to be there when she graduates college. I'm not going to be there when she gets married. And that isn't right. So I started running. And I didn't know anything about running. And I went out the door. By the way, if you're 400 pounds and you go for a run, every neighbor will be outside that day. They'll be outside with their dog. They'll be out watering their lawn. And it's horrible, horrible. I'm so glad I moved. And I ran half a block and thought I was going to die. And the next day I ran a block. And I ran every day for 6 months. Sometimes I'd run at 1 in the morning. I said, well, I'm still awake. It still counts. I didn't know any better. I ran every day for 6 months. I ended up losing 150 pounds. On my 50th birthday, when I was supposed to be dead, I was in the mountains of Arizona in the desert on Mount McDowell running an endurance race. It was like 84 degrees. I'm running up rocks and gravel. And I'm like, it's more like a fast walk. Don't fall. Don't die. Right? So I share that to say, I'm a pretty determined guy. I've been doing this since October 29th because nobody knew who the heck fire I was. Nobody knew who I was at all. I've been working as hard as I possibly can because it's time for the Republican Party to have a governor that reflects our values. This isn't about one person. This isn't even about a town. This isn't even about that. This is about an entire state that can come together right now and do good today and do good for tomorrow. And what we are doing today is so important. For me back then, with my health, I knew it was important to run every day. To not screw up on food, to figure it out. Can't lose 150 pounds if you don't figure out how to eat right. Had to stop eating ice cream. Had to stop drinking all the Mountain Dew possible. I was like, it's got no fat in it. I didn't know. I didn't know. So I've been running since October 29th of last year. And here we are today.
You're running again.
And I'm running. I'm running in a different way. I will not stop. We got 2 months as of right now. And right now, in 2 months exactly, it'll be 15 minutes probably till the polls close. And guess where I'll be? I'll still be running. I'll still be fighting. Because this is our moment in history where we can do so much good. And I promise you this, some of those bills, we're going to get together and we're going to work hard the second that inauguration is over, and we'll get them signed as close to day one as possible. And finally, parents will have a voice. Now, on day one, I'm going to start the education advisory group. It is no joke. And we're going to handpick one parent from each of our 10 counties. They're going to come in and meet with the governor, the Board of Education, and the Education Commissioner at least every 2 weeks. Because we need a voice from the community in Concord instead of walls and political stuff going on in Concord. We need the voice of the community to be able to get in the governor's office. If we don't get with parents today, and if we don't listen today, we are going to face so much loss in the future, and it is the most beautiful opportunity for the Republican Party, because the Democrats have never been more on the wrong side of history. So we're going to form this education advisory group so we will know with boots on the ground what is going on. And people who break New Hampshire's laws are going to face justice. And that is exactly what we're going to do. And I'm going to work hard every single day to make sure that you are represented, that the Republican values as a conservative are represented. But we've got to do the work now so that we win everything in 2 months. And people are like, how can you win? That isn't my job. I'm not here to figure everything out. I'm here to do the best I can with if I can get a little God on you here. You know, the story of the talents, that's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. I feel like he's giving me 1 talent right now, and I've made like 4 out of them. I'm working as hard as I possibly can to win. But we cannot give up, because the next 2 months have never mattered more. Don't believe that any race is over. Don't believe that anything is lost. Right now, we can do it. I think Youngkin was behind with 2 months to go by about 8 points. You can fact check me on that, but I know he was not tied until the last month. We've got a great opportunity here. We're going to do great work.
How about some questions?
Questions? That's perfect. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What about the Dominion voting machines?
Yeah, so listen, I'm an outsider. Here's what I always say. We've had colossal problems with the voting machines. We've had colossal problems. When you look at the facts, hand counts are more accurate overall. Most of the audits say that, okay? We don't, as an outsider, I'm not going to write anything off until we get in there and we form on day one the Office of Election Integrity, which is not a communication vehicle, which is what my opponent has right now. But we're going to have an actual Office of Election Integrity like they have in Florida that is going to crunch the numbers and do the work. I'm very concerned about moderators. I'm very concerned about mail-in ballots.
I'm just worried that
yeah.
the same thing's going to happen in November that happened in 2020.
Yeah, that is one of the, if you see on my website, that is one of the most important things. 58% of Republicans don't trust our elections. 30% of Democrats do not trust our elections. People know something's up. Let's do the job, and let's make sure by the time 2024 gets here, we don't have any questions. So we're going to go in there on day one, and we're going to get the job done.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of our founding fathers, I think, said that we get whatever degree of tyranny that we agree to go along with, that we'll tolerate.
Yeah.
So, you were talking about masks for school kids. It's still true today, after all these months, that you go into a hospital for something and the security guard will arrest you if you don't put on their face diaper. And as far as I know, it violates existing New Hampshire statutes. So when are we gonna get that straightened out?
Yeah, I think we can do that on day one as well. There's a time for private industry to have a stay over mask, but there's also a time, and health industry.
Accommodation.
But there's a time where the inhabitants of New Hampshire need to be able to feel empowered when they walk into a place, and they need to feel some level of freedom. And I think people in the healthcare industry that are friends of mine want the masks off as well.
Yep. Other questions? Sad thing. Oh, there's one more.
Yes, sir.
You said you were very pro-life.
Yeah.
New Hampshire right now has a 24-week abortion ban.
Yeah.
What would you do with that?
So I'll be honest with you, the baby's nervous system starts to develop at 19 weeks. So that's a colossal concern. At 12 weeks, you can see the baby's movement, the heartbeat, and all kinds of things on the ultrasound. You know, the technology continues to grow, which makes us more, remember I talked about we'll be judged by future generations. So abortion is a bad story because politicians who wanted to use it to get elected made it a bad story. I want to meet with pro-life groups, and I want to put us in a situation where we can get a bill on my desk within 2 years. There's no reason we need to do any abortions in the state of New Hampshire.
Right.
And I will sign that bill, and I'll call my mom. I may bring her up to the evening room. She would like that.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I'll be around after. Thank you, guys.
Croc TV.